The barrel of the pistol slid down Julian Cross's chest, its cold weight coming to a rest just below his navel. A voice from the shadows, low and venomous, asked him if the dalliance at Elysium on the night of June 7th had been worth it. Julian, half reclined on the leather sofa, regarded Caleb Thorne with an impassive gaze. He remembered running into Marco Vargas only yesterday. Marco had offered a cryptic, suggesting the man Julian kept by his side was not the loyal creature he appeared to be. Julian had dismissed it. Betrayal could come from any corner, but not from Caleb. 16 hours later, Caleb's gun was pressed against him. Seemed Marco was right. The man was a wolf he'd mistaken for a dog. The pressure of the gun increased. Caleb leaned against the back of the sofa, his form a dark silhouette against the Chicago skyline. He repeated his question, wanting to know if Julian had enjoyed himself. Julian let out a dry laugh. He wondered aloud if the gun was merely a prop for such a trivial question. Caleb remained silent. Julian's voice was laced with ice as he issued a cold, mocking invitation for Caleb to find out for himself. A flicker of movement, a slight tremble in Caleb's eyelashes, was the only response. Julian's smile was a cruel slash. He taunted Caleb, asking why he hesitated to pull the trigger. Caleb's next question seemed to come from nowhere. He wanted to know if Julian knew where he had been on the night of June 7th. Julian didn't answer. Caleb told him he'd been on a freighter in the middle of Lake Michigan, risking his life for Julian. He said the cargo Julian wanted, he'd secured it. Julian's eyes narrowed. He interpreted this as a complaint, a suggestion that Caleb felt unappreciated. If that was the case, the man was beyond ungrateful. For 8 years, Caleb Thorne had been the person he trusted most in the world. Caleb shook his head, insisting that Julian had never mistreated him. The fault, he claimed, was his own. He confessed to standing outside the door that night, tormented by the thought that if the person inside with Julian could be a hired body, then why couldn't it have been him? Julian stared, a flicker of disbelief turning to derision. He thought Caleb must have lost his mind. Caleb's throat worked, the gun barrel tapping against Julian's belt buckle as he admitted he wanted to try it too. He then had the audacity to claim he was in an awkward position and asked if Julian might be able to remove his own pants. Julian had never been so thoroughly humiliated. A raw curse tore from his throat, directed at Caleb's mother. The gun shifted, pressing hard under his chin. Caleb loomed over him, his face a mask of cold resolve. He informed Julian that grievances should be directed at the source. He was the one doing this, not his mother, so Julian should direct his fury accordingly. The insult ignited a fire in Julian's veins. He was filled with a primal urge to tear the younger man apart. He spat Caleb's name, a promise of future retribution in the single word. He warned Caleb to pray he could keep him down forever. Caleb agreed with the sentiment, remarking that he would go to church the very next day. His thumb brushed the corner of Julian's eye. He commented on how red they were, musing on whether the great Julian Cross was about to cry. The click of Julian's belt buckle being unfastened echoed in the quiet room. Caleb wondered aloud if Julian had ever cried before. He answered his own question with a soft, chilling laugh, reasoning that no one else had ever dared to push him this far. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. He was different from all the others, he vowed. He would make Julian hurt and he would make him cry. The prick of a needle in his thigh was sharp and sudden, a muscle relaxant. His body grew heavy, unresponsive, but he fought it, snapping his teeth at Caleb's fingers. The younger man barely flinched. As Caleb lifted him, carrying him toward the stairs, Julian managed to speak, his voice slurring. He reminded Caleb that he had made an oath. Caleb had sworn that if he ever betrayed Julian, he would deserve the most agonizing of deaths. It had been 8 years ago. Caleb, then only 18, had gotten on the wrong side of Marco Vargas, a dangerous captain in their organization. Caleb's mother, Isabel, had been the star attraction at Elysium, Julian's club, before an opioid addiction had driven her into massive debt. When Vargas's men came to collect, Caleb had severed one of their arms with a switchblade. Vargas had sworn to take Caleb's hands and feet in return. Elysium was Julian's territory. Isabel had dragged her son before him, forcing him to his knees, begging Julian to save him. The boy was 18, with a stark, unsettling beauty inherited from his mother, especially his eyes. On her, they were the eyes of a fox. On him, they were the eyes of a wolf. He knelt at Julian's feet, head bowed but spine ramrod straight. Julian, sprawled on his own sofa back then, had looked the boy over and sneered. It wasn't his problem, not his son. Isabel, wiping tears with a furious hand, had grabbed Caleb and hissed at him to call Julian father. Julian had laughed at the absurdity of it. Isabel paled and fell silent. Caleb never called him father. He had simply looked up and respectfully called him Mr. Cross. Julian asked the boy how he expected to be saved. Caleb's answer was simple. He would give Vargas back his man's arm, but no more. He wanted Julian to ensure it was a fair trade. Julian had laughed out loud. Fair trade. That was a concept reserved for family. He asked Caleb if he wanted to work for him. The boy's gaze was direct. He said he could do anything. Intrigued, Julian had made a call. His enforcer, Jack, brought in one of Vargas's men they'd caught snooping. Julian pulled out his pistol, handed it to Caleb, and told him to aim for the forehead and not to miss. Caleb took the weapon, checked it with an unervingly practiced hand, racked the slide, and aimed. The moment he squeezed the trigger, Julian's hand shot out, forcing the barrel down. The bullet ricocheted off the polished concrete floor. Caleb's gaze followed Julian's arm up to his face. He had asked if he passed the test. Julian hadn't answered, just shook a cigarette from his pack and placed it between his lips. Caleb, holding a lighter with both hands, had leaned in to offer a flame. Julian didn't move. In their line of work, you lived on a razor's edge. You couldn't afford to bring in unknowns. Caleb spoke then, his voice steady. He swore that if he ever betrayed Julian, he deserved to die a terrible death. He said if Julian had it in him, he should tear him apart piece by piece. The flame of the lighter had made his eyes burn with a fierce light, turning a casual oath into something that felt unbreakable. Caleb tossed him onto the bed. He removed his glasses, unbuttoned his shirt. His torso was a roadmap of scars, old and new. Bullet wounds, knife cuts, puncture marks. The most vicious was a long, raised scar that ran from his left shoulder to his right hip. Julian had given him that one himself. Vargas had been unyielding, demanding Caleb's hands and feet. Julian had stood between them, knife in hand, and told Vargas he could not have them. He brought the knife down across Caleb's back in one brutal stroke, declaring that if the boy lived, the matter was settled. If he died, the debt was paid. Caleb hadn't even blinked, just stood and took it. He was unconscious for a month. When he woke up, his first words to Julian were a soft complaint about how much it hurt. That boy, once so full of trust and admiration, was now the one pinning him down, conquering him. A wolf he had tried to raise as a dog for a decade. Caleb had never forgotten he was a wolf. It was Julian who had forgotten that some creatures could never be tamed. Julian snarled through gritted teeth that he should have killed him back then. Caleb, brushing damp hair from Julian's forehead, whispered a taunt by his ear. He told him not to have regrets. Regret, he murmured, made Julian seem particularly helpless. Helpless? Julian grabbed a fistful of Caleb's hair, yanking his head back. He hissed that for this he would truly kill him. Caleb's response was a lazy, soothing hum, as if calming a child. He invited Julian to do it then. He laughed softly, suggesting he would like nothing more than to die inside of him. After Caleb fell asleep, Julian slipped into his study and retrieved a burner phone from the safe. He sat with it in his hand for the rest of the night. At dawn, Caleb walked in, carrying his shoes. He knelt at Julian's feet and began to put them on for him. When he was done, he looked up and asked what Julian wanted for breakfast. Caleb rattled off a list of favorites, then decided for him. A consommé and an omelet. Julian hurled the phone at his face. He demanded to know why Caleb bothered asking. The edge of the phone caught Caleb just above his eye, opening a thin line of blood. Caleb caught the device as it fell, his grip tightening until his knuckles were white. He stared at Julian, his expression unreadable and dark. Julian couldn't tell if he was angry. He had never needed to guess at Caleb's thoughts before. He looked away, a subtle evasion. This was not a time to lose his temper. If he provoked this wolf now, a bullet could end the game permanently. Caleb picked up his glasses and put them on. He asked who Julian had been trying to call. Jack or Leo? He answered his own question, stating that Jack had his own problems, and as for Leo, it would be better if Julian didn't contact him at all. Jack was Julian's right-hand man. Leo Mancini was the man Julian once called his brother. Julian's hands clenched on the arms of the chair. He demanded to know what Caleb meant. Caleb's smile was thin. He marveled that someone as sharp as Julian couldn't figure it out. He dropped the phone into the desktop aquarium. He acknowledged Julian's loyalty, his reverence for the bonds of brotherhood. But not everyone, he said, was like Julian. If Julian still trusted his dear brother, he asked, why hadn't he made the call? Caleb told him he should be grateful that the one who betrayed him was him, because only he could not bear to see Julian dead. Julian closed his eyes, his lips trembling. He told Caleb to get out. Caleb didn't move. Julian's voice was low, failing to conceal a tremor. He begged him to leave. Caleb stood there for a long moment before turning and walking out of the room. How had it come to this? The boy he had raised himself had turned on him. The brother he would have died for wanted him dead. He spent the night trying to find excuses for Leo Mancini, but the facts were unavoidable. Caleb would never have dared to make a move like this alone. Not unless the family supported him. Not unless Leo, the man with whom he'd sworn a blood oath years ago, no longer wanted him alive. Ricky Mancini came to visit when Caleb was out. Ricky was Leo's son, a vicious and undisciplined thug who dabbled in narcotics trafficking with his father's tacit approval. 2 years ago, Julian had caught Ricky dealing in his club and had personally taken 2 of his fingers as a. Leo had smoothed things over, but the animosity between Julian and Ricky remained. Ricky told his uncle Julian that if he just handed over what he was looking for, he would take care of the Caleb problem personally. Then Julian could go back to being the respected boss of his Chicago territory. Julian narrowed his eyes and asked what it was he supposedly had. Ricky's face hardened. He told Julian to stop playing games and give it to him. Julian stared at him for a long moment, then smiled. And if he refused, would Ricky kill him? Ricky's expression was a mask of impotent rage. Julian watched him unruffled. He taunted his nephew, asking if he truly had the guts to kill him. Ricky lunged, grabbing Julian's collar and throwing him to the floor. He kicked him like a dog, screaming that Julian was nothing, a powerless mutt who had no right to act defiant. When his tantrum subsided, he hauled Julian to his feet. He asked one more time where the item was. He looked pathetic, wanting to kill Julian but terrified to do it. Julian opened his mouth, but no sound came out. As Ricky leaned closer, Julian's hand found the paring knife he had hidden in his sleeve. He lunged for Ricky's throat, but the drugs Caleb had given him had slowed him down. Ricky dodged, and the blade only sliced across his neck. Ricky cursed, clutching the wound as he wrestled Julian to the ground. He snatched the knife and raised it high, screaming that he would kill him. A hand shot out and caught the blade. Thick, warm blood dripped onto Julian's face. Caleb Thorne stood over them, gripping the knife's edge, his gaze fixed on Ricky. He remarked calmly that it was a shame Ricky hadn't called ahead. He took the knife from him and instructed the black-suited men behind him to take the young Mr. Mancini to a hospital. Ricky, who had been a rabid dog moments before, was suddenly a whimpering lamb. He pointed to his neck, his eyes wide with theatrical fear, complaining to Caleb that Julian had tried to kill him. Caleb looked at the gash in his own hand and said nothing. Ricky demanded satisfaction, grabbing at Caleb's jacket and whining that Caleb had to cut Julian for him. Caleb leaned down and patted Ricky's cheek with the flat of the blade. He told him to stop being hysterical and go to the hospital. The madman stared at him, and then, surprisingly, was led away without another word. It was fascinating. Caleb knelt beside Julian, using his uninjured hand to lift his shirt and inspect the bruises. He murmured that Julian had been wronged. Julian spoke. He said Ricky mentioned something he had hidden. He asked Caleb what it was he was supposed to be hiding. Caleb's gaze was dark. He told him it was evidence, a ledger detailing all of Leo Mancini's crimes. He said that if Julian died, that ledger would mysteriously appear in the hands of the police. Julian had no such thing. Caleb's fingers gently probed a bruise on his abdomen. He told Julian that if he said he had it, then he had it. Julian understood. The only reason the Mancinis had let him live this long was because of the lie Caleb had concocted. He wasn't loyal to Julian, but he wasn't entirely loyal to Leo either. And that was good. If he could betray one master, he could betray another. Julian pushed himself up, leaning against the coffee table. He undid Caleb's tie and began wrapping the silk around his wounded hand. He asked if Caleb could get rid of Leo Mancini. Caleb looked down, a small smile playing on his lips. He claimed he wasn't that capable. Besides, he said, the tie wouldn't do any good. The cut needed stitches. But he didn't stop Julian's clumsy attempt at first aid. He then added that Julian was terrible at asking for favors. He was asking for the world, but his heart wasn't in it. Julian asked what sincerity would look like. He tightened the makeshift bandage, his other hand moving to rest on Caleb's belt buckle. He leaned in close, his voice a low purr, and asked if this was sincere enough for him. Caleb drew a sharp breath. His eyes met Julian's, and for a moment he looked deadly serious. He said he didn't know who Julian was right now, but he needed to get off Mr. Cross immediately. Damn him. Caleb took him to a private clinic for a full examination, then brought him right back to the penthouse. He seemed genuinely afraid of Julian dying. As the city lights blurred past the car window, Julian finally asked the question that had been burning inside him. Why did Caleb betray him? Caleb's answer was simple. It was so that the next time Julian went to buy a stranger's company, he would have the right to kick down the door. It was laughable. Julian couldn't believe he'd gone to all this trouble just for a chance at his bed. Caleb glanced at him, a smirk on his face. He said Julian's affection was worth a king's ransom. A month ago, Julian would have shot him for the sheer audacity. Now, he could only consider how to use this bizarre obsession to his advantage. His body could be a bargaining chip, but he had one condition. He told Caleb he should watch a few instructional videos. Caleb's dry response was that a man with his injuries shouldn't be making sarcastic remarks, lest he invite further activity. Despite his words, Julian later saw him in the study, watching something on a laptop. The room was dark, the screen's light flickering across his impassive face. If not for the faint, rhythmic sounds coming from the speakers, Julian would have thought he was watching the stock market report. Practice, it seemed, made perfect. Caleb was a quick study. Julian found himself lost in a haze of pleasure so intense his mind went blank. The bruises on his stomach were still fading. Caleb warmed some liniment in his hands and began to gently massage the discolored skin. Julian, propped against the headboard, studied him. In these moments, he could almost look gentle. It was always after sex that a man was most pliable. Julian pressed the glowing tip of his cigarette onto the back of Caleb's hand. The muscles in his forearm went rigid, but he didn't move. He looked tame, but what part of a traitor was ever real? The cigarette went out. Julian told him he didn't want the drugs anymore. He crushed the butt in the ashtray and added that he wouldn't run. He was a cornered animal now, with enemies everywhere. He wasn't that stupid. Caleb shook his head. He didn't trust him. He had been with Julian for so long. He knew him better than anyone. He told Julian not to bother trying to sweet-talk him. Julian cupped his jaw, forcing him to meet his gaze. He reminded Caleb of the incident with Ricky, of how he'd been kicked to the ground, unable to even defend himself. He asked Caleb when he had ever been so helpless. It was Caleb's doing. The great Julian Cross had become a dog anyone could kick. He asked if Caleb got a thrill from seeing him humiliated. Caleb's voice was rough, his eyes dark with an unreadable emotion. He promised that what happened with Ricky was a mistake and would never happen again. Julian laughed, a cold, bitter sound. He patted Caleb's cheek condescendingly. Did he really think he was in control? An accident that happens once can happen again. Julian warned him that swimming with sharks might get him eaten. His hand fell away limp. He told Caleb that if he had any humanity left, he would leave him a shred of dignity. The next day, Caleb didn't give him the injection. He was about to leave while Julian was eating breakfast. He got to the door, put on his coat, and then suddenly turned back. He pulled Julian from the chair and into a fierce, tight embrace. He pleaded with him, asking for more time, for one more chance. Julian patted his back. He told Caleb it was time for him to go. And it was time for Julian to go, too. The game was over. The next time they met, it would be on adult terms. He knew the location of every camera in the penthouse. The real challenge was the doubled security detail outside. Caleb was far too cautious to ever fully trust his word. That afternoon, Julian vanished from the surveillance feeds. Caleb returned quickly, searched the penthouse, then left with his men. Once they were gone, Julian emerged from an old ventilation duct. His first stop was to see Marco Vargas. The night before Caleb's betrayal, Marco had tried to recruit him. He'd said that Leo Mancini was getting old, and old men get careless. Marco had long wanted to carve out his own empire. He was the one who most wanted Leo gone. In the past, Julian's loyalty to Leo had made him and Marco enemies. But times had changed. To kill Leo, Marco was the perfect partner. Marco told Julian he didn't trust him. Julian replied that he could kill Ricky Mancini for him. Marco laughed. He asked if Julian hadn't heard. The previous night, the cops had raided Ricky's main drug stash house. Ricky had fled the city, and now there was a warrant out for his arrest. Julian feigned surprise. Marco shrugged. Someone in the organization must have turned traitor. He looked at Julian with narrowed eyes, asking who he thought it might be. Caleb's face flashed in Julian's mind. Marco said he did have a favor to ask. He handed Julian a phone. The screen showed a photo of a woman holding the hand of a small boy, about 4 years old. He asked Julian to do him the favor of collecting them. Julian looked at the phone and asked who they were. Marco stood up and clapped him on the shoulder. They were Caleb Thorne's weakness, he said. His wife and son. Marco explained that the dog Julian had raised had started a family 4 years ago. Caleb had hidden them so well that Marco had only recently found out. He was certain Julian didn't know either. The family was currently being held by Leo Mancini. Marco guessed that Leo was using them as leverage, which was likely the reason for Caleb's betrayal in the first place. After Marco left, Julian sat holding the phone for a long time. "I've never been with anyone. Teach me. I can't bear to see you die. Why not me? Just give me a little more time, one more chance." Thank God. Thank God he hadn't believed a single word from that two-faced wolf. Not one word. What must have been going through Caleb's mind, a man with a wife and son, when he was in bed with him? When Julian was trembling beneath him, was Caleb thinking that the untouchable Julian Cross wasn't so impressive after all? That brought low. He was just another pathetic creature. Begging for scraps? Damn him. Caleb Thorne. Julian was going to take everything from him. With Ricky on the run and Leo overwhelmed, it was the perfect time to make a move. The operation went smoothly. Julian stashed the woman and child in an abandoned underground boxing gym on the south side. When he removed the woman's blindfold, her reaction was bizarre. She looked at him with tear-filled eyes and breathed his name, her voice full of relief. Julian squinted. She looked familiar. He asked if she knew him. The woman opened her mouth, then closed it, giving him a look of deep, sorrowful reproach before turning to hug her son, refusing to speak further. Julian glanced at the little boy. He was a handsome kid, sitting quietly, his dark, serious eyes fixed on Julian. Julian scowled, trying to look intimidating. The little boy slowly looked away and muttered the word childish. This little punk. Julian felt an urge to tell him that Uncle was going to kill him. Why was everyone with the last name Thorne so infuriating? For hours later, Caleb walked into the gym alone. Julian sat on a sofa, loading a pistol. The boy sat at his feet, watching. The woman was gagged and tied to a chair, the red dot of a laser sight centered on her forehead. Caleb approached slowly. Julian finished with the gun and tapped the boy's head with it, telling him to close his eyes. The child obeyed. Julian raised the pistol and fired a shot that struck the concrete floor by Caleb's feet. He ordered him to stay put. Caleb stopped, raising his hands. He told Julian to let them go, that he would do anything. Julian laughed. He asked if that was the same promise he'd made to Leo Mancini. He called Caleb a heartless, treacherous bastard. Caleb just looked at him. He said Julian wasn't like Leo. He wouldn't kill them. Julian hated how well Caleb seemed to know him. He turned the gun and pressed it to the boy's temple. He tilted his head and asked if Caleb dared to test that theory. Caleb's eyes were locked on the gun, his tension palpable. Julian told him to kneel. Without a moment's hesitation, Caleb dropped to his knees, the impact echoing in the vast, empty space. So they really were important to him. Julian took a deep breath, suppressing a surge of inexplicable anger. He demanded to know when Caleb had started working with Leo. It began a year ago, Caleb admitted, his gaze unwavering. He reminded Julian of the conflict over the narcotics trade, of how Julian had broken with Leo and taken Ricky's fingers. Leo had eventually backed down, but his concession wasn't to his brother, Julian Cross. It was to the powerful crime lord who controlled half of Chicago. Caleb said he had warned Julian repeatedly that Leo couldn't be trusted, but Julian refused to hear a bad word against his old mentor. The more he pressed, the more Julian grew annoyed, eventually sending him away to manage operations on the East Coast. Caleb said he had to shut up if he wanted to stay by Julian's side. He remarked with a tone of bitter irony that Julian couldn't see the man holding the knife until the blade was at his own throat. He had to pay a price before he would allow himself to wake up. He was right. There had been a time when Caleb had subtly urged him to break from the Mancini family, reminding him that his name wasn't Mancini. Julian had beaten him for it and told him to get out and not come back until he'd cleared his head. Caleb had spent 6 months exiled on the coast. When he returned, he knelt at Julian's side, pressed his forehead to his knee, and begged him not to send him away again. After that, he never spoke another ill word of Leo Mancini. Until the betrayal. So in the end, Julian had been wrong. But he was still alive. And as long as he was alive, he could still win. He told Caleb he had 1 month. Leo Mancini's life in exchange for the lives of his wife and son. He rubbed his temples and said he would wait exactly 30 days. Caleb replied that 30 days was more than enough. As he was leaving, he glanced back at the little boy, his expression complex. He asked Julian to be gentle with him. The nerve. Who was he to give Julian orders? Julian looked down. The boy had opened his eyes and was sticking his finger into the barrel of the gun. He looked up with wide, curious eyes and asked if he could play with it. Julian unloaded the pistol and tossed it to him. 3 days later, the boy, Sam, disassembled the entire weapon in front of him and then put it back together perfectly. He handed it back, yawned, and asked if Julian would hold him while he slept. Julian refused. Then could he be returned to Caleb? Also no. Then he wanted to sleep, so could Julian please hold him? He promised he wasn't heavy, and Julian could put him down once he was asleep. He held out his arms, expecting to be picked up. He was just as annoying as his father. Julian's arms were for holding rifles, not children. The little pest, now successfully nestled in Julian's arms, patted his arm. He instructed Julian to pat his back gently to help him fall asleep. The kid was full of demands. Julian, patting his back, asked if his father usually put him to sleep this way. Sam said no, that Caleb never held him or put him to bed. So why did Julian have to? The boy yawned, clutching Julian's shirt. Because you're handsome, he mumbled. And you seem more fun. This kid was far too clever. 7 days after Caleb's departure, Ricky Mancini was killed in a shootout with federal agents at the Canadian border. Leo Mancini's health failed rapidly. 20 days later, news of his death was made public. Before Marco Vargas could make his move, several of his establishments were raided by the police. The death of Chicago's old guard crime boss barely made a ripple. Instead, the city's anti-crime task force celebrated a string of major successes. Caleb Thorne, meanwhile, reinvented himself as a legitimate businessman. His investments and companies, part of their original plan to go clean, had flourished. By the time he emerged from the chaos, the remaining captains of the old organization had already rallied behind him as the new leader. Marco and his men stormed the boxing gym. He pointed a gun at Julian's head and demanded to know where the people he wanted were. As soon as Julian heard of Leo's death, he had secretly sent Caleb's family away. His dog was his to command, and no one else's. Marco sneered, asking if Julian was really protecting the man who had ruined him. Julian calmly poured a glass of whiskey. He told Marco that Caleb's life was his to take, and his alone. Marco cocked his gun, telling Julian he could wait for him in hell. Julian took a sip. A couple of days ago, he'd sat in on a philosophy lecture at the university. The professor, a man named Dr. Albright, had been quite impressive. If Marco Vargas had a weakness, it was his brilliant, beautiful brother-in-law. Out here, Marco was a killer. In front of that soft-spoken academic, he didn't even dare to swear. Marco's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. He forced a cold laugh, asking if Julian thought he could be threatened with someone so insignificant. Julian informed him that 140 cargo ships were docked in the port, all scheduled to depart by 2 p.m. The next day, the first had already left an hour ago. He asked Marco to guess which one Dr. Albright was on. Blood rushed to Marco's face. He hissed Julian's name through his teeth. Julian pushed the gun away. He told him not to point it if he wasn't going to use it. He stood and straightened his collar. If he hurried, he might just catch the last ship out. Marco cursed and ran, his men scrambling after him. Julian followed at a leisurely pace. A black Mercedes was waiting outside the gym. Caleb Thorne stepped out and walked toward him. He told Julian it was time to go home. Julian drew his own gun and pressed it to Caleb's heart. Caleb didn't flinch. He was utterly confident. He knew that if he died, Julian wouldn't last a week. Julian turned the gun around, offering it to him. He told him to do it himself. Caleb shook his head. He hadn't lived long enough yet. He had only just earned the right to enjoy the spoils of his victory. He took Julian's hand, his gaze bold. He told him not to make empty threats about his family. Then he removed the magazine from the gun, ejected the single-chambered round, and spoke in a voice that was half sincere, half mocking. If Julian really wanted to threaten him, the gun had to be pointed at himself. Julian cursed him all the way home. It was only when he saw the little boy building a tower of playing cards in the living room that he understood Caleb's confidence. Caleb was pathologically cautious. He would never leave such a vulnerability exposed before making a grand entrance. Caleb lifted Julian and carried him toward the stairs. As they passed the living room, he called out to Sam, telling him to go to his room. Sam looked up from his cards, then obediently started toward his room. At the doorway, he turned back, pointed at Julian, and asked if, when Caleb was done playing with him, he could have a turn. Were they all just toys for the Thorne family? Caleb's lips curved into a smile as he flatly refused. Sam watched them disappear up the stairs. Julian and Caleb fought in the bedroom. It ended, as it always did, with Julian's defeat. Caleb used his own belt to tie Julian's wrists, pinning his legs and holding him down on the bed. He patted his rear and told him to behave, that he didn't want to have to drug him again. Humiliated and furious, Julian screamed at him. He asked if he was an animal with his son just downstairs. Caleb just raised an eyebrow. Didn't that make it more exciting? Julian tried to appeal to his conscience. He asked how Caleb could do this to his wife. Caleb replied that it was fine, she wouldn't mind. Julian shouted that he minded. He wasn't going to be the other man. Caleb seemed delighted. He said he'd divorce her tomorrow and marry Julian, making him the proper spouse. Before Julian could respond, Caleb seized his neck, forcing his head up to meet a kiss from behind. Why? Why, when he had a family, did he insist on doing this? Julian kicked him off, twisted, and in a swift move had Caleb pinned beneath him. Kneeling over him, he wrapped his hands around Caleb's throat. He swore he would kill him. Caleb, unconcerned, simply grabbed his wrists and pulled them apart. Thrown off balance, Julian fell onto his chest and was immediately enveloped in an embrace. Caleb patted his back twice, as if soothing a child. He told Julian not to say things he didn't mean. Real men, he murmured, didn't make empty threats. Julian looked for an opportunity to kill Caleb nearly every day. He failed repeatedly, but each failure only strengthened his resolve. Once, he even got his hands on Caleb's gun and pulled the trigger. In that split second, neither of them moved. Caleb stared at him, stunned, taking a full 3 seconds to process what had happened. When he looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed. He said that if he hadn't used the last bullet the night before, he'd be dead. He grabbed Julian's wrist, pulling him close, his face a twisted mask of anguish and rage. He asked if Julian could truly bear to do it. Julian's voice was low. He was a traitor. Why wouldn't he? A traitor? Caleb's hand tightened on his throat, a hint of madness in his eyes. He demanded to know who else would have risked everything to take out the Mancinis for him. He said that Julian only dared to point a gun at him again and again because he knew. He knew how much Caleb loved him. He knew that no matter what he did, Caleb would still love him. Julian used that love as a weapon, all while refusing to acknowledge it. But love, Caleb hissed, was not a bottomless well. He could get angry, too. He locked Julian away. Sometimes he was suspended from the rafters, sometimes tied to the bed. He was fed drugs that turned him into a living doll, unable to move, completely dependent on Caleb for everything. For 10 days, he lost every shred of his dignity. He apologized to Caleb. He begged him for mercy. Finally, he begged him to just kill him. Perhaps that frightened him. Caleb dressed him, opened the door, and kissed his forehead, promising it would never happen again. Julian didn't believe him. Caleb knew him too well. He knew how to break his spirit, how to make him submit. If he stayed, he would be turned into nothing more than a pet. He had to leave. He had to get far, far away from Caleb Thorne. His plan was exposed before he could act. Caleb wasn't angry. He just calmly told him that he couldn't escape without his permission. And also, he should stop trying to use the ventilation ducts. Julian's eyes widened. How did he know? Caleb explained that the last time Julian had escaped so easily, it was because he had let him. Leo Mancini had been demanding Julian be handed over. Caleb couldn't refuse outright, so he created an opportunity for him to run. He was him, he knew everything. Julian couldn't get away. He was underestimating him. 2 months later, Julian made it to the port, but before he could board a ship, he ran into old enemies. As a bullet tore through his stomach, he wondered what he was even fighting for. The list of people in Chicago who wanted him dead was endless. Outside the city, he had no power, no home. Chicago was his home. He couldn't leave. Caleb had been right all along. He truly couldn't escape. When Caleb found him, he was barely breathing. Caleb clutched his hand, hot tears falling on Julian's face. He pleaded with him not to leave him, to stay alive. Julian's eyelids grew heavy. He found himself thinking that Caleb could cry. Had he ever cried before? Caleb's voice was desperate. He threatened that if Julian died, he would kill Sam. Julian might be willing to leave him behind, but surely he wouldn't abandon Sam. He wasn't his son. Why would he care? Caleb's voice was ragged. Sam was his son. The shock and rage were enough to bring Julian back from the brink. 3 months later, He had Caleb cornered in his hospital room, demanding an explanation. Caleb looked at him for a long time before speaking, his words reluctant and tinged with resentment. It was all because of a debt from Julian's wilder, younger days. A one-night stand had resulted in a child. 4 years ago, the woman had shown up with the boy. Caleb intercepted them. After confirming the child was Julian's, he lied to the woman, telling her Julian wanted nothing to do with them. To keep her quiet and prevent a scandal, Caleb agreed to support them financially, on the condition that they never contact Julian. Caleb had carefully managed the secret for 3 years, until Leo Mancini found out a year ago. Leo then used the boy and his mother to force Caleb's betrayal. The entire story was so absurd, so outlandish, that Julian grabbed a pillow and threw it at him, the movement aggravating his wound. He hissed in pain, asking what in God's name Caleb had been thinking. Caleb caught the pillow, his eyes fixed on Julian's bandaged side. His voice was low and hoarse. He was afraid Julian would marry her, start a family, develop a weakness. He was afraid Julian would die. He was afraid Julian would discard him. He was nothing, after all, so easily thrown away. Caleb looked up, a humorless smile on his face. He confessed he didn't know what else to do to make Julian finally see him. He then added, his voice dropping, that even if it was just for Sam's sake, Julian shouldn't keep fighting. In the current climate, it would be difficult for them to survive without him. He couldn't say more, just repeated the plea, his words heavy with unspoken meaning. For Sam's sake, stay. Julian closed his eyes, speechless. In the master bedroom, Sam was perched on the edge of the bed, his chin in his hands. He asked why Julian was back. He thought he was done with Caleb. He then asked if Julian could take him along on his next escape attempt. Julian narrowed his eyes, pinching the boy's cheek. He remarked that Sam was a little too smart for his own good. The boy blinked and threw his arms around Julian's neck, wheedling. He begged to go, saying he wanted to be with Julian. Caleb, he whispered, was mean. Julian's eyes narrowed further. Had Caleb been mistreating him? Sam sniffled, putting on a pitiful act. He whined that he hated Caleb and they should run away together. Julian looked up and saw Caleb leaning against the doorframe, holding a cup of coffee, a wry smile on his face as he watched his son's performance. Just as Julian was about to laugh, Sam's whining stopped abruptly. He jumped off the bed and smoothed his clothes. He told his uncle to rest well, because his dad said it was dangerous outside and he shouldn't run around. He then turned, saw Caleb, and let out an exaggerated gasp, followed by a sweet, angelic dad. Caleb walked over and, with one hand, lifted the small boy off the floor. Sam asked where they were going. Caleb replied that they were going to have a little talk about how, exactly, his dad had been mistreating him. Sam looked back at Julian, his expression desperate. He yelled, "Handsome man, get your man in line." Julian laughed so hard his stitches ached. He called out for Caleb to go easy on him. 3 days later, Sam was sent away to a secure boarding school. Julian and Caleb had another fight. It ended with Caleb pinning him against a desk. He told Julian that Marco Vargas was back. Chicago was about to become a war zone, and it wasn't safe for Sam to be with them. Julian sneered, asking why he didn't just send him away, too. Caleb was silent for a moment, then released him. He knelt down and began to put Julian's shoes on, a gesture he had performed countless times. "Because you," he said, "are Julian Cross of Chicago. You would never leave this city, just as I would never leave you. You will die with this city, just as I will die with you." He rested his forehead on Julian's knee, his voice muffled. He pleaded with him not to go. Julian threaded his fingers through Caleb's hair. I'm not going anywhere, he said. Not anymore, Caleb. For this lifetime, this will have to be enough.